Hello, everyone. I'm Gene Riordan. I have Bernard Keevy with me today. We're colleagues in the business coaching world, business consulting and coaching. And I'll be interviewing Bernard about some of the amazing things he's doing to help small businesses grow. And he'll be able to explain some of the techniques and strategies that he's learned and that he passes along to clients. Bernard, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Okay, well, my name's Bernard Keevy. I'm a colleague of Gene's. We're both part of a team of international coaches called Leader Publishing Worldwide, 750 of us around the world. My background, a long time ago, I trained in accountancy when I left university. Then I spent 12 years or so in higher education colleges, so lecturing in finance, accountancy, banking, those sort of areas, sales and marketing as well. And then I spent 20 odd years in financial services in sales and marketing. And for the last 10 years, I've been working as a business coach, and I'm also a chartered financial planner, so I still keep my hand in there. I work as a business coach with small business owners, helping them grow their business. And at the moment as well, I'm working with accountants in particular and helping them develop their practices and offer coaching services to their clients to help develop their clients' businesses.
Oh, good. Let me ask you this. You've touched on it, but what about your background makes you particularly well suited to helping a business owner with his financials and profit growth?
Okay, well, that's a good question, Gene. As I say, my background is in accountancy. I trained in accountancy, and I also lectured in finance and business for many years. And I think what that helped me do was sort of see the big picture and work out how to explain things simply using visuals, so tables, charts, diagrams, flow charts, rather than getting bogged down in sort of numbers and getting bogged down in detail. So I like to think that you can actually make things visible and actually explain concepts and show how these principles work. Whereas sometimes people get blinded when they see a massive numbers and they can't actually see what the big picture is amongst the numbers. Does that make sense? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It helps them to see it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what's the biggest issue most small business owners face in growing their business?
Okay. Well, I think we both probably see the same thing, really, Gene, which is it tends to be that people start businesses, particularly small businesses, by being good at something and deciding that they're going to run a business doing this thing. So it tends to be that they are being busy doing the things they're good at, because that's easier and more comfortable than to stop doing so much of those things and to stand aside and find the time to work on their business. So therefore you get the classic phrase, people are being busy working in the business, rather than finding the time to be able to stand aside and work on the business. And because of that, they never really get too far because they're busy, being busy. It's very difficult to take your business to the next level. It's Michael Gerber's book, the E-Myth, and it's the reason why so many small businesses do fail in the first 5 or 10 years, because unless you can get past that point, it's very difficult to take the business to another level.
So they may be doing things that they really love, but they need to sometimes raise their head up from their really busy day and say, I've got a business here and I've got to make sure we make some profits and stay around. Yeah. That brings me to another question. What areas should they focus on?
Well, basically, it's the 80-20 rule. It's 20% of what you do gets you 80% of your results. 20% of the 20%, which is 4%, gets you 80% of the 80%, which is 64, so 2/3 of your results. So there's a few key areas, and literally only a few. And if you spent more time working on the few key areas and making small improvements in them, you'd make a dramatic difference to your bottom line profit, and you'd have more spare time as well. So the few key areas are, your numbers are driven by volume and price, and volume is driven by how many leads and referrals you get and how many you convert into customers. So if you can work on small improvements there, you can work on getting substantial improvements in your volume. Your revenue, your average revenue, your price is again determined by several factors, but it's fairly easy to make modest increases to your average price that you receive per transaction. And then you can improve your profit margin by working at reducing your direct costs. And if you can get your customers to buy from you slightly more frequently, again, that will increase your volume. So those few key areas, small improvements will make a dramatic difference to your bottom line. Frequently you'll find you make a 5 or 10% improvement in 4 or 5 key areas, you can double the bottom line profit. In fact, I was looking at an example today where just making a 5% improvement in 3 key areas, so sales revenue, not even volume or price, but sales revenue in total, the direct costs and the overheads, and we actually increased the bottom line operating profit by 2/3, 64%, I think it was. Amazing how a few small changes can make.
Excellent. Here's a question. What is the difference between being self-employed and owning a business?
Okay, well, again, Gene, as we were saying earlier, that goes back to the being busy person who starts a business and then they do what they're good at. And basically, they're effectively doing the job they would have been doing, but they're doing it working for themselves. So themselves is their boss. So they're self-employed, they're working for themselves, but they're not really running a business because they're not really taking time to step aside from all the busy aspects of working in the business, to stand above it and to work on the business, to put a few key plans and strategies in place, to make those small improvements, to get their sort of headroom, to be able to take the business to a different level. So I would say that the being busy is self-employed, whereas the people who actually do find the time to work on their business and diarise it so it happens, that's when you start to actually own a business. And again, it goes back to Michael Gerber and the E-Myth, and the vast majority of small business owners are in the self-employed category rather than the business owner category. Would you agree with that, or?
Absolutely. I find myself sometimes getting busy. I do things I like to do, but I have to raise my head up sometimes and say, I've got a business here to keep going. Looking at other potential employees or even just people that are on contract work. You have to keep it all managed, delegate, do some planning for the future, and all that means you got to start working on the business instead of in the business, like you said before.
Yeah.
So it's a good distinction: self-employed versus owning the business.
Yeah.
That you're hoping to grow. Because at the end of the business lifetime, think about what it's going to be worth. If you're self-employed, that's it.
Yeah.
You own a business that has potential to be ongoing. Talk about that a second.
Yeah. Well, if you're, as you say, if you're in the self-employed being busy category, then no one's going to buy the business because the business isn't anything unless you're part of it. Mm-hmm. So it depends what your aims are for the business. So do you want to build a business that you can sell? Do you want to build a business you can pass on to someone? Or do you just want to get a living from the business doing something you enjoy? Is it a lifestyle? Depends what you're looking for. But if you are looking for a business that at some stage will give you the option of maybe selling it as an exit strategy, then you have to get to the stage where you're owning a business and the business doesn't depend on you being there doing all the work. It has to be a business that will run even if you're not part of it. And if you're not in that stage, then really you haven't got a saleable asset as a business.
It's definitely a good part of the planning process. I'm thinking of some husband and wife businesses that do most things themselves. They're on the verge of being able to call it a business. In fact, to everybody on the outside, you could call it that way, but they haven't put the strategy and the pieces in place to make it work if they weren't there.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to be able to offer people a little consultation and coaching on how to look at the setting up as a business and go and following a strategy to get there if you're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, they need an organization chart, they need systems in place, they need to outsource the things that aren't being done by people in the organization chart, and they need to get a system, that's a series of processes and systems that will run so that someone else can come in and still run it. So it's the argument is you need your business to be as much like a franchise model as you can make it, because the more franchisable it is, the more you can sell it to someone else who can make it run profitably.
So you're documenting things just like a franchise would hand you a standard operating procedure that's this thick,
Yeah.
So you need to pretty much at least have the fundamentals all documented
Yeah, yeah,
Someone else
yeah.
could understand it. Good
Yeah,
point.
your sales process, your accounting process, how do you chase up revenue? I mean, who does what and how they're supposed to do it, what scripts you use when people answer the phone. The more you can document and systemize, the better, basically.
And a fellow that's running or gal that's running their own business as a self-employed person, they may not have the skill or want to do that, but if they hire somebody, outsource it, recognize the need, somebody like yourself could guide them probably to putting a document like that together.
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
would be much less painful if
Yeah,
than spending their own weekends and being confused about what they have to do to begin with.
absolutely. Completely. Yeah.
All right, Bernard, I've got another question here for you. Financials and profit growth strategies are complex. How do you convey your ideas in this day of virtual meetings? How do you like to convey your ideas?
Well, I think going back to what I said earlier, I think you can make, to the extent that you can make things visual, I think that helps people actually understand what's happening. And also, I'm a big believer in seeing the big picture. I think it's very easy, for instance, with financials, it's very easy to see something as, it affects that number there and it affects that number there. But what a lot of people don't realize is that every single transaction within a business will actually affect the balance sheet. And if you can understand what is happening to the balance sheet, which is a snapshot of the business at any given time, if you understand that whatever you do is making a difference to that, then you actually understand the big picture better. And if you understand the big picture, I think it makes a lot more sense than trying to, understand all the individual elements that make it up. I think that's true of a lot of things. I think you really understand things well when you understand the big picture and how they all fit in with each other, how they all fit into context. And the more you understand how things fit together, synthesize, the more you understand it properly, I think. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, and it goes back to your background. You're particularly well suited to guiding people that may not naturally be understanding of their balance sheet. They know they work, they get their invoices out, and they pay their taxes. Need to do a little more planning than that, and by showing them how to set up the financials. But as far as the actual visuals, I think you've made some good points about the charts and the software. We'll talk about that in a minute, or ask you questions further
yeah.
down the line. Let me ask you this: do you prefer working with business owners and entrepreneurs, or with corporate managers, and why?
Right. Okay. Well, business owners and entrepreneurs definitely, so long as they've got the wherewithal to have some margin to actually, take their business forward. They're not hand to mouth, and they're not, busy being busy, as we said earlier. But the thing about business owners and entrepreneurs is they're decision makers. So if they see something as being a good idea or a good strategy, they can actually implement it. Whereas if you're talking with corporate structures, then you're not really dealing at most times with a decision maker. So even if they think something's a good idea, they can't actually implement it without going through the hierarchical structures. So they might have to go through committees, through departments, through board meetings. It becomes very hierarchical and very difficult to actually get people to be able to actually have the authority to make the decision themselves. So the ideal sweet spot is someone who owns their own business, is entrepreneurial and owns their own business. So entrepreneurial means they're working on the business rather than working in the business, really. But they've got enough wherewithal to actually, and enough ambition to want to take the business forward and to actually, spend something doing that. They're the ideal people to work with, I would say.
Good, because there's millions of small businesses out there. It's just a matter of finding the percentage that do have a revenue, coming in, some money coming in, so that they can afford these to continue to grow and get better.
Yeah.
So catching them at the right time when they decided, okay, no, that's not enough for me to just be a self-employed person. I need to grow a business.
Yeah.
And you can help them from there.
Well, actually, there's another point to that self-employed person as well, is that if you read Michael Gerber's book, he quotes the fact that, is it 80% go bust within the first 5 years, and of the 20% that are left, 5%, 80% of them go bust in the next 5 years. So it's going back to the old thing about staying where you are isn't really an option. You're either moving forward, or it's like pedaling a bike was a great analogy. The thing about a bike is if you don't keep pedaling, you fall off. So it's the same with a business, really. Staying where you are isn't actually generally an option. You need to either be moving forward or else effectively you're moving backwards.
That's a good point. What's the difference between business coaching and consulting? I know you can do a little of each, but people get confused about a business coach versus a consultant. What's the difference?
Yeah, there's a wide spectrum, and there's mentoring comes into this as well. But in simple terms, a coach helps business owners work out what the best thing to do is, and helps them, gives them information and skills, helps them with information and skills to be able to do it themselves. Whereas a consultant, that end of the spectrum is generally where the consultant's doing it for them and they don't want to do it themselves. So it's the teach a man to fish as opposed to doing the fishing yourself. So on the coaching end, you're teaching them to fish and then they're going to do the fishing, whereas on the consulting end, you're doing the fishing for them. And obviously the consulting end is much more expensive to pay for because you're paying someone to do it for you, which means it's much more time consuming. Now, going back to Leader Publishing Worldwide, LPW, this is the organization we both work for. The beauty of LPW is that we work with a system, an online system, which has all the templates, the strategies, the information, the how-tos to do these things. So really where we come in is we help the business owner show them how they can implement these things themselves, and the online system does all the heavy lifting and sort of imparts the information for them.
So that bridges over into that question about the software that you have available to you, that we have available. Is the software you use to demonstrate fast growth from this LPW? Want to explain how that works?
Yeah, it's called the Profit Growth Accelerator. There's nothing to touch it in the marketplace, as I'm sure we both agree. Basically, what it does is you put in a few key numbers, so turnover, gross margin, net margin, and then you can discuss various strategies which work for virtually any business. And what we do is we can decide which strategies to look at, maybe 2, 3, or 4 of them, and we can actually explore how much difference they make to a company's revenue and profit. And it'll produce charts and diagrams showing exactly what's happening. It'll produce a report, a 13-page report, and within the body of the software as well, it actually shows you exactly how to implement these strategies as well. So really, any business owner, spend an hour being interviewed with the software, they'll get a complete report showing them key strategies that would work for their business and exactly what those numbers would be, and it'll show them charts and diagrams so they can actually see it all and make it visual. So it's a pretty powerful piece of software, and as I say, I don't think there's anything to touch it in the marketplace, but I might, as far as I'm aware anyway, I haven't seen anything as powerful at all.
From what I've seen, there's a lot of experts that help small business owners understand what they need to do and then show them in black and white with the figures and the charts. That software really moves it a long way so that they understand these numbers. Because sometimes people talk about 10% improvement here, 10% there, 10% there, and naturally they'd add it up to 30.
Yeah.
But the software makes it graphically clear that the multiplier effect comes into play. So it's more like 30 times or 10 times 10 times 10. You're ending up with a much higher percentage of improvement depending on what category you're improving there. Would you agree?
I would. I mean, a classic is if you actually work the numbers out, if you can increase your average revenue slightly, that has 2 effects. One, it increases your turnover, your revenue. But 2, it increases your margin, your gross margin. So you actually end up, the way it multiplies is you end up with a bigger multiple of a bigger figure as your profit. And you make 5 or 10% improvements in the 4 or 5 key areas. There's only 4, basically. It's how many leads you generate, what proportion you convert, how often people buy from you, and how much they spend each time. Those 4 key numbers. And if you make 5 to 10% improvement in those 4 key numbers, you'll be well on the way to doubling the profit for most businesses. Because typically businesses have, 15, 20% net margin. You make those sort of improvements and you really do notice the difference on the bottom line. Makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, and it's what people need that are living hand to mouth. They may be doing a lot of things right, but they end up with not enough profit to take vacations or to satisfy their spouse. You know that
Yeah,
hey, all this work is worth it, and
yeah,
or even to cut down on the hours. If profit is a priority, they find they can't cut their hours because they're not bringing it in. But
yeah,
if they follow a few other strategies that you could help them with, the profit turns around and actually is there so that they can achieve their goals and their life
yeah,
dreams.
yeah,
You
and
want to
actually have a better life, basically. Yeah, yeah.
would you like to wrap up our interview with a couple more comments and then it'll be it?
Well, as I say, I think the main things that are worth getting across, the main messages are, first of all, it's people often don't know what they don't know. So it's what you don't know that makes the big difference. So they don't know what strategies work, but they also don't realize typically how much difference it makes to implement a few of these few ideas. It makes a huge difference. And then the other big lesson, I think, is that very small changes, a few small changes, can make an incredibly large difference to your bottom line profit. And it goes back to what you said. It's not a question of 5% here, 5% there gives you 10 to 15% on the bottom. It's more a question of 5 to 10% here, 5 to 10% there gives you 50 to 60% on the bottom line. It's disproportionate, and I'd say most people don't realize that. Most people don't realize, for example, that if you put your prices up by 10%, rather than reducing them by 10% with a discount, you can often end up with twice the profit or virtually twice the profit. The difference between discounting or being able to charge slightly more is huge, disproportionately huge for most businesses.
So these strategies are things that you specialize in. I've learned a lot from dealing with you and working with you. These are strategies that small businesses can benefit from for a very reasonable amount of time and money
Yeah,
to bring you into the picture.
yeah.
Well, I think that's it for our interview. I appreciate having a chance to ask you those questions, Bernard, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you very much, Gene. And there were some excellent searching questions there. So very interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.